The handcuffs snapped shut so loudly that the entire luxury store fell silent in an instant, and every single head turned at the same time, phones slowly rising, whispers spreading like fire, because a tall black man in a simple hoodie was being pinned against a glass display case by two security guards, while a third one twisted his arm behind his back like he was some kind of criminal caught in the act, even though there was no stolen item, no alarm, no proof, just suspicion, sitting heavy in the air like it always does when people decide what you are before you even speak. "Stop resisting," one of the guards barked. Even though the man wasn't resisting at all, his body still, his breathing controlled, his eyes scanning the room, not with fear but with something else, something deeper, like he had seen moments like this before and already knew how they ended. "I'm not resisting," he said calmly, his voice low but clear enough to cut through the tension. But nobody stepped in. Nobody questioned it, because the story had already been written in their minds the moment they saw him. Claire stood a few feet away, her arms crossed, trying to look confident but her eyes flickering with uncertainty as customers began recording. Some shaking their heads, others whispering things like "I knew it," and "these people always try something," feeding off each other's assumptions like it was entertainment instead of someone's life. Being dragged through the dirt for no reason. "He was acting suspicious," Claire said loudly, as if she needed to justify everything to herself more than anyone else, and one of the guards nodded like that was all the evidence he needed. The man didn't argue. He didn't shout. He didn't beg. Instead, he looked straight ahead and said something that made one of the younger guards hesitate for just a second. "You might want to be careful what you're doing," the guard scoffed, tightening the grip. "Yay, and why's that?" But the man didn't answer right away, and that pause, that small silence, felt heavier than anything else in the room, like something unseen was about to crash into all of them at once, because outside, through the glass walls of the store, a black SUV had just pulled up, smooth and deliberate, followed by another one right behind it, and then another, doors opening almost in sync, men in suits stepping out with a kind of urgency that didn't match a normal shopping day, and people near the entrance began to step back, confused, curious, sensing that something bigger was unfolding. Inside, the guards were too busy trying to prove a point to notice. "Search him," one of them ordered. The man finally smiled, just slightly, not out of amusement but out of certainty, like someone who already knew the ending of a story everyone else was still trying to figure out. "I wouldn't do that," he said quietly. But they did it anyway. They checked his pockets, his hoodie, his hands, and of course, they found nothing, not even close to anything that could justify what they had just done. But instead of backing off, one of the guards doubled down, raising his voice like being louder could somehow make him right. "Maybe he dumped it somewhere," he said, looking around, trying to keep control of a situation that was already slipping. That's when the store manager came rushing out from the back, his face tight with stress, his tie slightly crooked, clearly alerted by the growing noise and the cluster of people filming everything. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Claire stepped forward immediately, eager to explain. He was acting suspicious, hovering around the watches, not buying anything, and then he reached toward the case, like he was going to. "I didn't touch anything," the man said, calmly. The manager looked at him, then at the guards, then at the crowd, and for a moment, you could see doubt creeping in. But pressure is a powerful thing, and instead of stopping it, he nodded slightly at the guards. "Take him to the back until the police arrive." That was the moment everything shifted, because right as they started dragging him toward the employee-only door, the front entrance burst open, and one of the suited men stepped inside, his presence commanding immediate attention, his eyes scanning the room quickly until they locked onto the man in handcuffs. And then, something no one expected happened. "Let him go right now." The voice was sharp, controlled, and carried across the entire store like authority itself had just walked in. And every single person froze, including the guards. "Sir, this is a private matter," the manager said cautiously, stepping forward, trying to maintain control. But the suited man didn't even look at him. Instead, he took a few steps closer, his gaze fixed on the man being held, and then he said something that made the air feel like it had been ripped out of the room. "Do you have any idea who you've just put in handcuffs?" The guards hesitated, glancing at each other, their confidence cracking for the first time. "Sir, he was suspected of theft." "No," the suited man cut in sharply. "He was not." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. And then, slowly, deliberately, the suited man reached into his pocket, pulled out an ID, and held it up just enough for the manager and the nearest guard to see. The manager's face changed instantly. Not confusion, not doubt, fear, real, unmistakable fear. His posture shifted, his voice caught in his throat, and for a moment, it looked like he might actually lose his balance. I didn't know, he stammered. Clearly, the suited man replied coldly. The guards immediately loosened their grip, stepping back like they had just realized they were standing too close to something dangerous, something far beyond their control, and the handcuffs were removed with shaky hands, the metallic click echoing louder than before, but this time it sounded like regret. The man rubbed his wrist slowly, calm, as ever, like none of this had surprised him. Sir, we apologize, the manager said quickly, his entire tone flipped, desperation creeping in. This was a misunderstanding. The man looked at him for a long second, not angry, not loud, just disappointed. A misunderstanding doesn't start with handcuffs, he said quietly. No one had a response for that. Not Claire, not the guards, not the manager, because deep down, they all knew exactly what it had started with. And then, just when they thought the worst part was over, the suited man turned to the manager and said something that made Claire's knees feel weak. There won't be any police report, he said, but there will be a hearing. The manager blinked. A hearing. The man in the hoodie finally spoke again, his voice steady, controlled, but now carrying a weight that everyone could feel. You'll find out soon enough. 2 days later, the courtroom was packed, not just with regular spectators, but with media, reporters, and people who had seen the video that had already gone viral. Millions of views, endless debates, headlines questioning everything from racial profiling to corporate accountability, and at the center of it all was the same man who had been handcuffed in that store, now dressed in a sharp suit, standing at the front with a composure that felt unshakable. Claire sat on one side, her hands trembling in her lap, the manager beside her, both of them looking smaller than they ever had before, stripped of the confidence they once carried so easily. This doesn't make sense, she whispered. Why is this such a big case? The manager didn't answer, because he already knew. When the courtroom doors opened and the judge walked in, everything changed again. Because the moment the judge looked up and saw the man standing there, he froze. Not for long, just a second, but long enough for anyone paying attention to notice. And then, slowly, the judge did something no one in that room expected. He stood up, not as part of procedure, not as routine, but as recognition, respect. The entire courtroom fell into confusion, whispers spreading instantly, reporters leaning forward, cameras zooming in, trying to capture the moment. And then the judge spoke, his voice steady but filled with something deeper. Mr. Carter, he said, I didn't expect to see you here under these circumstances. Claire's breath caught. The manager went pale. And for the first time since this all began, fear turned into something much worse. Realization, because the man they had humiliated, handcuffed, and dismissed was not just another customer, and whatever was about to happen next was not going to end the way they had hoped. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything that had come before, like the entire courtroom had just realized they were witnessing something far bigger than a simple misunderstanding in a store. And Claire could feel her heartbeat in her throat as she looked from the judge to the man they had handcuffed, her mind racing, trying to piece together how someone she had dismissed so easily was now standing in front of a judge who had just risen to his feet for him. The man, Mr. Carter, gave a small nod of acknowledgement, not proud, not arrogant, just composed in a way that made it clear he was used to rooms like this, used to being heard, used to being respected, even if moments like the one in the store still found their way into his life. Your Honor, he said calmly, his voice carrying across the room without effort. I wish the circumstances were different. The judge exhaled slowly, then sat back down. But the respect didn't leave his posture. It lingered in the way he looked at Mr. Carter. Like there was history there, something unspoken but deeply understood. For the record, the judge said, glancing briefly at the attorneys before returning his gaze to Carter. This court recognizes Mr. Carter not only as a private citizen, but as a man whose work has impacted this state in ways many people here may not even realize. A ripple moved through the courtroom, reporters whispering quickly, fingers flying across keyboards, and Claire felt her stomach drop as she leaned slightly toward the manager. What does that mean? She whispered, her voice barely audible. The manager swallowed hard, his eyes fixed straight ahead. It means we're in serious trouble. On the other side, the defense attorney stood up, adjusting his tie nervously. Your Honor, with all due respect, this case is being blown out of proportion. My clients acted based on reasonable suspicion. Reasonable, the judge interrupted, his tone sharpening just enough to cut through the lawyer's confidence. We will determine what was reasonable after reviewing the full evidence, including the video that has now been viewed by millions. That word hung in the air. Millions. Claire closed her eyes for a second, remembering the phones, the people recording, the whispers she had ignored, The moment she had decided what kind of person he was without asking a single real question. And now that moment had followed her into a courtroom where there was no escaping it. Mr. Carter remained still, his hands resting lightly in front of him, his expression unreadable, but inside there was a quiet storm, not of anger, but of something heavier, something built from years of moments like this, moments that never made headlines, moments that didn't end in courtrooms, moments where people like him were judged, dismissed, controlled, all because of what others chose to see. "This isn't just about me," he said suddenly, his voice steady but carrying an edge that made everyone listen. "What happened in that store happens every day, just not always with cameras around." No one interrupted him. No one could. "I was handcuffed without evidence, accused without cause, and treated like I didn't belong in a place I had every right to be in," he continued, his eyes briefly moving toward Claire. Not with hatred, but with a kind of clarity that made her look away instantly. "And the only reason this is here, in this courtroom, is because this time, people were watching." The judge nodded slowly, his expression serious. "And because of that, it will be addressed properly." The prosecution stepped forward next, confident, organized, already prepared for this moment. "Your Honor, we have submitted the full video footage from multiple angles, along with witness statements, and we are prepared to demonstrate that this was not a matter of reasonable suspicion, but a clear case of racial profiling and unlawful detention." The word hit like a hammer. Racial profiling. Claire felt it land directly on her chest. "That's not fair," she whispered under her breath, more to herself than anyone else, but even she didn't fully believe it anymore. Because deep down, she remembered exactly what she had thought when she first saw him. Not what he did, not how he acted, just him. The defense tried to push back, bringing up store policies, training procedures, the need to protect high-value merchandise, but every argument felt weaker than the last. Because none of it explained why the situation had escalated so quickly, why handcuffs had been used before any real verification, why assumptions had been treated like facts. Then came the moment that changed everything again. The prosecution called a witness. "Your Honor, we would like to call Judge Daniel Reeves to the stand." A murmur spread instantly. The judge at the bench paused, then gave a small, knowing nod. "I will temporarily step down for this testimony." Claire blinked in confusion as another judge entered to take his place. And Daniel Reeves, the same man who had stood up when he saw Mr. Carter, now walked down from his position and took the witness stand. "I didn't expect this," Claire whispered, her voice shaking. The manager didn't respond. He couldn't, because he already understood that whatever was about to be said was not going to help them. "Judge Reeves," the prosecutor began, "can you explain to the court how you know Mr. Carter?" Reeves adjusted slightly in his seat, his gaze steady. "About 12 years ago, I was involved in a case that nearly ended my career and, quite frankly, my life as I knew it. I was wrongly accused, publicly humiliated, and facing consequences that would have destroyed everything I had built." The courtroom was completely silent now, and Mr. Carter, Reeves continued, his voice firm, "was the man who proved my innocence." Claire's breath caught again. "He didn't have to," Reeves added. "There was no benefit for him, no recognition waiting at the end, but he did it anyway, because it was right." He paused for a moment, letting that sink in. "So when I saw him standing in that courtroom today, after seeing the footage of what happened in that store, I stood up not out of habit, but out of respect for a man who has spent years standing up for others, even when no one was watching." The impact of those words was immediate, heavy, unavoidable. Claire felt tears burn in her eyes, not out of sympathy for herself, but from the crushing weight of realizing how wrong she had been. How quickly she had reduced someone to a stereotype, how easily she had helped turn a normal day into something humiliating and painful for someone who had done nothing to deserve it. Mr. Carter didn't react outwardly, but there was something in his eyes now, something softer, something that showed this wasn't about revenge. It never had been. It was about accountability. It was about making sure moments like that didn't keep happening unchecked. The courtroom session ended shortly after, but the damage had already been done. And as people began to file out, reporters rushing to capture statements, cameras flashing, voices overlapping, Claire remained seated for a moment longer, unable to move, unable to pretend this was just another day she could walk away from, because this time, there was no ignoring it, no brushing it aside, no pretending it wasn't real. And as Mr. Carter walked past her on his way out, she finally found the courage to speak, her voice barely steady. I'm sorry." He stopped. Just for a second, then he looked at her. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, but with a calm honesty that was harder to face than anything else. "I hope you mean that," he said quietly. because next time it might be someone who doesn't have a courtroom to walk into. And with that, he kept walking, leaving behind a silence that said more than anything else ever could.